this week and then next week. And just kind of a bit of a heads up, next week we're actually doing, we're doing like we'll probably end like 20 minutes early, and we've got ice cream. So we'll do like an ice cream social. The kids will come down. We'll have a chance to just kind of hang out and do that as like a nice celebration at the end of our time together. So it should be fun. But like all weeks, what we open up with when it comes to this is our opening segment, which is Where Your Treasure Is, a game that is designed to encourage us to find our treasure where Jesus invites us to. And so with that, the name of the game typically works like this. At your table, you're gonna have like 60 seconds to figure out as much of this thing as possible. And I'm going to reveal the category in just a second. And the way it works is the team that has the most, the biggest number, no chat GPT allowed, no AI included, but the team that has the highest number of this particular thing, they win, and they get to send up a person to basically get a prize from the treasure box. And there's good stuff in there. So, okay. All right, 3, 2, 1. Name as many Thanksgiving foods as you can in 60 seconds. Three, 2, 1. Time's up. Pencils down. Pens down. Okay. Who's got 10? 10's pretty easy. Okay, that's good. Everyone's still in. I'm just going to jump right ahead. Who's got 20? 20? You got 20 over here? We got 20 here. We got 20 there. Okay. What's your number? 21? You got 19? 21. She's still counting. I think you lost. Yeah. How? I don't. Yeah, that's true. It's true. 21? 23. Okay. All right. 23. You guys are our winners. Whose birthday is closest to today? Meg, yours is like the exact opposite part of the year. Oh, wow. They're both so far away, I don't really know. I don't know. You can both come get something. There's only 2 of you. You can both win something. Yeah. It's also impressive that you won with just 2 of you, so. Yeah, we do. Yeah. Yeah. Greg Kokel, that's a really good book. Yeah. This one explains the gospel in really clear language. This one's fun because it has pictures. Who's who in the Bible. It's like it's like a Bible encyclopedia with pictures. But this book's good. This book's really good. Yeah. Uh-huh. All right. Okay. All right. Well, yeah, just want to say thank you to everyone for coming on out tonight. Whether it's your first time or whether you've been here a bunch throughout, the fall, Midweek Reset is just designed to be a chance, really designed to offer us a chance to kind of catch our breath, to connect in the context of relationships and with friends, and also to reset our focus on that which matters most, to reset our focus on Jesus. I think sometimes by the time we get to Wednesday night, there's a whole bunch of things that have happened in our lives, either in work or in our relationships or whatever it might be. And so this is kind of a chance to invest into our sense of community and to invest in our relationship with God as well. So And the way we do that in here specifically is we've been going through this content of a class called Making Sense of the Bible. And this is designed basically like a sitcom. So it's not a mini-series like Band of Brothers or anything like that. It is Seinfeld. So if it is your first night, that's all good, because this is basically designed to be a class where you can get value out of it whichever night that you come on out. So you haven't missed anything and you're good. And any night is a good night to jump on in with it. And this class is really all about helping us to understand the Bible, how to make sense of it for our own lives, to be able to understand it, make sense of it, and live according to it. And this has kind of been our anchor passage or our anchor verse throughout the class, the Psalm 119, 105, that tells us, your word is a lamp for my feet, a light on my path. Right? Your word is a lamp for my feet, a light on my path, which I think is really helpful, because it's getting at the idea that the reason we read and study the Bible isn't just because it's sort of this, it's not just out of like curiosity or because we're interested in this ancient culture that's super far removed from us. It's not any of that, but these are like this collection of 66 books, like these are the very words of God that are given to us to be able to know how to navigate this life well, how to handle our responsibilities, how to handle conflict, how to handle so many different things that we have in this life. It's almost like if we're going through life is like driving down a road at night, and the headlights, understanding the Bible, being able to make sense of it is like being able to turn on the headlights and see where we're going and kind of understand where the road is and when to turn right, when to turn left, and all of that. So the hope is tonight that we all get a taste of this directly ourselves. And the way we always do that is the hope is every night you walk away with two things. One is a clear understanding of one passage, the main passage that we're looking at. The other thing is you walk away with one new skill that you can take with you to apply to your own Bible reading, making sense of the Bible for your own life, apart from here. And so that's our goal for tonight. And our passage is Judges 6, Judges chapter 6, verses 33 to 40. If you've never spent any time with Judges, it is a wild ride that gets wilder as you go. But this will be fun. We're going to get into no dumb questions in just a second. But real quick, I just want to, throw this one idea out there that what we're doing here when we're practicing these skills, there's almost two different ways of reading the Bible. And I think what we're doing here is exegetical study. It's where we're like practicing the fundamentals. So if you think about anything, like if you think about cooking, or if you think about playing sports, one thing that I go to is like with basketball. There's certain drills that you practice to like shoot, where you're practicing your mechanics, and you kind of work them over and over and over again until it becomes almost second nature. You don't have to think about it anymore, right? You can just play the game and enjoy it. But in order to get there, you have to practice the mechanics and the fundamentals. And what we're doing here with these tools, that's us practicing the fundamentals in the mechanics. And that's really the first thing, where you're taking a passage, digging into it, applying these tools, figuring out what does it mean? How do I make sense of it for my life? How does it help me in my life? But there's also a second way of reading the Bible, which is just like relational investment, that it's given to us to help us to invest in our relationship with God, that we engage with this for the sake of investing in that relationship. And if I think about basketball, if I go back to that, if you're just kind of shooting around, or if you're just like playing pickup basketball and you don't have the mechanics down, to be honest, it's not that fun. That if we're not good at things, it's not that enjoyable, right? But the better we are at the first thing, the more fun the second thing gets. And I think the second thing, for most of us, that's what ends up making up most of our Bible reading. Is like, for me, it's like reading a chapter or two a day and like kind of jotting down like a page of prayer. And I'm not doing a super deep exegetical dive into that, but the better you get at applying the skills, I think the more meaningful and fruitful the second layer becomes. And so that's a lot of what we're doing here, is investing in our skill with the first layer, paying attention to mechanics and tools, so that the second layer can be even more significant within our lives. But that's enough setup. We'll go ahead and jump into it with our opening passage segment, which is called No Dumb Questions. No dumb questions. And so what we're going to do is, you got a page in front of you, piece of paper in front of you. The idea is the best thing that we can do at first with a passage to get clarity on what it means is to first get clear on what we don't understand about it. And the best tool for identifying what we don't understand is questions. And so the idea is grab a pen, start reading through it, and just start marking down questions you have. about what does this mean? Is there any significance to this? Why is this included, right? Every detail's in there with intentionality. And so if you need some prompts, there's some up on the screen. But take 3 or 4 minutes, write down your own questions, and then start talking around your tables about the questions other people are having. All right, let's jump into it. Okay. All right, let's bring it back together now. Hopefully that gave you like a good sense of kind of what your questions are. And typically the way we do this is we have a chance to revisit it later on. So that's the passage, and we got clear about what we don't understand about it. But now what we're going to do is kind of spend some time exploring a new skill, what might be a new skill, that'll help us to kind of answer the questions that we have later on. So we'll explore the skill, do some other things in between, and then we'll come back to the passage later on. So with that, what we've got in between is the actual skill that we're looking at, which is this keyboard like goes to sleep and then comes back. I'm just waiting for it to come back. But the skill that we're looking at, yeah, here we go, is that of, so the Cara project is really where this content comes from. And we're looking at the final one, which is application today. So application is what we're exploring, which is actually where we get to the point where we've understood the meaning, and we're going beyond that to take it into how does this impact the way that we actually live our lives? How does it help us to steer the car and to essentially drive our lives better than what we would without the Bible? And so how can you apply this passage to your life? And you could ask, well, why is this important? And it's because the Bible is a book about God, and with that is the Bible. The goal of reading the Bible is not to become smarter or more well-versed or to be great at Bible trivia or anything like that. It's to be transformed, that it's offered to us to actually bring about change within our lives, within ourselves, within our relationships, within our sense of purpose and meaning within this life, even our sense of peace, that the Bible is intended to transform us. And that really doesn't happen without application. So application is really a key piece of this. And if you ask the question, well, how do you do application well? These are some really key fundamentals to it. They've got this acronym of prayer that I think is really helpful. That prayer is, first you pray, respond, ask, yield, express, remember. And so first off, just be opening up with prayer and asking, man, okay, so I've had the chance to break this down and to understand it, or maybe I'm still on the way to understanding it. But how do I, God, how do you want me to apply this to my life? That the Bible in so many ways can actually guide us into a conversation with God in a prayerful way as we're working out, what does this mean, and what would you have me do with this? And so prayer is significant. There's also responding to a cultural or a timeless truth. One of the things that's important is to understand, is the truth we're dealing with in this passage, is it cultural or is it timeless? Because in some ways, in a lot of significant ways, that'll play into how we actually do apply it to our lives. Ask what you learn about God. I think this one is probably my favorite out of the whole acronym of asking, what do you learn about God? That if fundamentally the Bible, some theologians call it the self-revelation of God, that it's basically God's introduction to humanity, that he's given it to us so that we can read it and understand who he is and know him and have a relationship with him. And so with that being the case, one of the best questions we can ask of any passage is, how is this helping me to know who God is better? What is this leading me to understand about God that maybe I wouldn't have understood otherwise? And so that's a huge piece of it. Yield, personal bias, and assumptions. This is kind of interesting. I've heard it put this way, that if we never allow the Bible to challenge us, or you say if you never allow God to challenge you, that then in some ways you've kind of created a God in your own image. If your understanding of the Bible is one that agrees with you on every single thing in life, then in a way you're interpreting it almost as if you're kind of creating God in your image. I think Tim Keller, who was a significant pastor over the past 30 years, he put it like that. And so the idea is the Bible has the ability to challenge us and lead us into a greater understanding of truth that we can build our lives upon. And so yielding personal bias and assumptions, allowing it to challenge us, is significant for that. The E, express fears and concerns. Sometimes the things that we're wrestling with in there, sometimes the reason yielding is difficult because there's some things in there that, it can challenge us in some pretty sensitive places, some places that can be pretty tender. And I think one of the most helpful things to do in that case is actually to just be willing to express those fears, express those concerns in the context of our relationship with God. That prayer is an invitation to bring not just our polished or clean version of ourselves, but to bring even our frustrations, even the things we're afraid of, even the concerns we have. Even when those things are with God, he invites us to bring those things up to him in prayer. And so that's always a wonderful way also to I think, really meaningfully apply And then the last thing is remember through memorization. Remember through memorization. That memorizing the Bible can be a really helpful way to draw out, I think, some more application from it. When we get into prayer at the very end, with talking with Jesus, we're actually going to talk about memorization there and how that can play a really key role within prayer. So that's kind of like a quick overview of them. If we kind of jump through them now, one by one, just with some examples, start with prayer. God, what do you want me to learn? How should I apply this to my life? And so, Acts 10:1 and 2, there was a man in Caesarea named Cornelius, a centurion of what was called the Italian regiment. He was a devout man and feared God along with his whole household. He did many charitable deeds for the Jewish people and always prayed to God. That's just kind of getting at the idea that that prayer in and of itself is a legitimate application, that it doesn't have to be a massive next step that we take, that prayer itself is a significant next step. The next day, as they were traveling and nearing the city, Peter went up to pray on the roof about noon. In this story, these two passages are related, and God works through their prayers in a way that draws them together and brings out some pretty sweet things in Acts chapter 10. Respond. Is it a cultural or a timeless truth? And, we'll have a sense to look at this in a second, but one key principle is it cannot mean now what it didn't mean then. And so before we can know what it means to us today, we must first determine what it meant to them back then. That's one of the main reasons why this class is significant. In order to make sense of the Bible for our lives, in order to apply it meaningfully, we have to understand it first. Because if you don't, you can end up applying it in some ways that are just plain like not helpful. So, for example, 1 Timothy 2:9 and 10, also the women are to dress themselves in modest clothing with decency and good sense, not with elaborate hairstyles, gold, pearls, or expensive apparel, but with good works. This is proper for women who profess to worship God. So if you have any gold jewelry, any pearls, or elaborate hairstyles, which I don't know what that means, like at what point does it become elaborate, but you better figure that out, because otherwise, like you're in trouble. So with this, there's something cultural. There's a timeless truth to pull out of it, but there's also, it's coming in this cultural baggage that requires some study to be able to decipher what's cultural here that Paul is addressing in the first century in Ephesus, and what's timeless. And that's where the tools that we've been looking at each and every week, they play a really big role in the tools that we're looking at even today. One way to help determine this, one really simple way, that if you're like, I don't know how to break down everything and know everything about the first century, one really clear way to determine the difference between a cultural truth and a timeless truth, where the separation is the concept repeated throughout the Bible. The idea is we want to whisper where the Bible whispers and shout where the Bible shouts. And so what that means is, if this is just like a one-off, we only see it here and in no other place, that means that this probably is something that is cultural and is being addressed in this specific situation, right? That there's an author who's writing to an audience that had a situation. There's reasons for them to be writing. And if we only see it once, if it's not repeated, then that's a place where the Bible's whispering. But if we see this again and again and again, that's a place where the Bible's shouting, and there's something meaningful to take away from that, and it probably means it's more timeless. Okay, ask, what do you learn about God? Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. I think it's John Crist, the comedian. He has like a great routine, and the whole thing's based on this verse. And he's basically just upset over like how much Christianity culturally has shifted from when he was a kid in the 90s, where it was like, in a way, things were strict then. And he's like, now my younger siblings, they get to do whatever they want. But okay, so anyways, that's really funny. But what do we learn about God? God doesn't change. Luke 14:26-27. If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. We had the chance to break that down last week, and we'll look at it again in just a little bit, actually. But God desires our hearts above all else. He's not telling you to hate your family, obviously. But what we learn about God within that is that God desires our love above all else. And you could even say one of the things we learn about ourselves is that the best thing for us is to love God above all else. The best thing for the people in our lives is to love God above all else. That the way that life works best is when we put God first. That's what Jesus is unpacking there. Okay, yield. We all have assumptions and biases about certain things. And this is just given a couple of different examples here of things that were like this within the New Testament. So, one of the things that happens with Peter is this understanding that certain animals were unclean. As a Jewish man, he wasn't to eat those. And yet what Jesus accomplished was something that fundamentally changed all of that. And so you see him working through a lot of that within the context of the book of Acts. But to spell this out in a way that I think applies to us more directly, you could look at a lot of these different things, like drinking, smoking, swearing, tattoos, dating, sex, food, that there are certain positions that people will have or certain perspectives or understandings on all of those things that at times can be like we have a certain bias coming into those things, and I think it's important to, on those types of things, to allow the Bible to challenge the bias that we come into those things with. And so yielding our biases, allowing the Bible to challenge us, all of that is a really helpful thing. Express what fears or concerns do you have with this one. I think it can be a hard one for a lot of people. Like, how am I supposed to, hate the people that I love the most, right? And when we dig into it, we see that that's not what it means. But still, how do I love God more than my spouse? How do I love God more than my kids? Sometimes just expressing the difficulty with that in prayer can be a really helpful application. And so you can kind of see all of that with Jeremiah 29:11. But instead of spending time on that, I want to jump into this, which is almost like a gamified version of applying these things, just to help us get into it a little bit. So this segment's called Wait, Are You Sure? Because the idea is if we don't have a firm grasp on what the Bible's teaching us, or if we even have it's easy to get certain passages wrong and to misapply things to our lives. And so the question, what I want to explore is that right there. That when you're reading, sometimes you come to a thing and you're reading the Bible, you're like, man, this is God's word. It's intended to help me in my relationship, and this is supposed to, help me with my relationship with God and how to live well. And then you read something and you're like, wait, are you sure? Is this real? Is this really saying this? And so, guys in the room, if you want to speak to this, I'm just kidding. Okay, so here's the game. There's 3 potential applications, and what I want to say is just feel free. What do you think? What do you think a proper application of this is? C. Yeah. Thanks for saying that, Mandy. Yeah. So the idea here is that Paul is responding to something cultural. Again, if it's whispering, if you only see it once, there's likely something cultural happening here rather than something timeless. And this is Paul is whispering here, and he's likely addressing something cultural within the city of Corinth, within the first century, within this church. And it's difficult to know exactly what was happening there, but the timeless principle we can extract from that is not that women should not speak, obviously, because there's so many other examples from the Bible as a whole and even the New Testament that directly counter that. So we know that it doesn't mean that. So the question is, what is the timeless principle? And I think the answer is something that we do see in other places, that order and organization in church services is important. One of the values we have around shaping our services on Sunday mornings is making sure that it's there's an order to it, there's an organization to it, and that there's not a sense of distraction, basically, that there's nothing happening in it that deters from someone's ability to learn about God and to grow in their relationship spiritually. And I think that's what Paul is addressing here. And so, that's one example. Here's another one. Matthew 7:1, do not judge. Is the answer A, it's inappropriate to ever challenge anyone on something in their life? B, recognize your faults before challenging others? Or C, those who critique others are disobeying Jesus? The answer is B. It's B, yeah. Yeah, it's not wrong to challenge other people or to critique other people in a loving way, because the Bible actually invites us to do that. Ephesians 4:15 is this whole passage around how the church builds itself up into maturity. And in 4:15, it talks about one of the primary ways that happens. And it says, as we speak the truth in love, to one another. As we speak the truth in love to one another, we help each other grow spiritually. And speaking the truth in love is like a way that we challenge one another. But what Jesus is speaking to here is basically hypocritical judgment, where I'm like condemning and casting judgment without actually considering the things that are happening within my own life. And so it's not that you can't challenge other people. It's just like consider your own life as well as you do that in love for other people. So does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. All right. Wait, are you sure? 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Okay, so A, the Salt Lake is drying up because of Utah's sin. B, the Dust Bowl would have never happened if there had been more Christians in Oklahoma. And C, there's like nothing but Christians in Oklahoma. but C, the more a group lives in alignment with God's truth, typically the better it will be for that group. The answer is A, Utah's sin. Just kidding. No, yeah, so this promise comes in the context of the Old Testament, which again, God had this relationship with Israel where if they did good, they would get good. If they did bad, they would get bad. And so this is written directly along the lines of that relationship. And Deuteronomy 28, fifth book of the Bible, that spells out all of those things. And so this is, so much of the Old Testament is written on the foundation of that arrangement. But what's unique about this, so what's timeless about this, what's cultural is the covenant they had, the relationship with God that they had. But what's timeless is the reality that God invites us to live according to his truth. And the more that we do that, the more it brings about our good, our peace, our joy, our sense of purpose, healthier relationships, the more it honestly, genuinely does bring about human flourishing. That a life built on God's truth leads to human flourishing. And so the more that happens within the context of like an individual, a family, a state, an entire community, that does lead to flourishing. And so, and so there is something timeless within that. Okay, here's another one. Malachi 3:10. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it. So A, if you give 10%, God will give you back even more. B, you have to give before God will bless you. And C, we're no longer commanded to tithe, but it's still a wise practice with many benefits to our lives. These are too easy in a way. It's clearly A, but no. What do you think? C. Yeah, okay. So, the relationship that Israel had was one where it was like, you do these things. What was good was spelled out. They had to check these boxes and live according to these rules. And one of those was tithing. We'll actually have a chance to kind of explore a little bit of like their construct of tithing this Sunday. But that's not what we have. That's not the relationship with God that we're invited into. The New Testament, you see Jesus talk about money more than any other subject, and you still see this addressed within the New Testament, but it's not within the framework of tithing. And so we're no longer commanded to tithe, and it's not like our relationship with God, in a sense, suffers if we don't do that. We don't have to worry about anything, but it's an invitation. It's still a wise practice with many benefits to our lives. And so, Okay, Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. A, you can't call the bad things in your life bad because God made them happen. B, if you're upset with God about the bad things that have happened in your life, you need to get over it. C, God is able to bring good out of even the worst things we experience, which truly are bad things. Yeah, the answer is C. I think there's something actually really significant about being able to call bad things bad. That if we've been through something awful, that if we've been through some suffering, if something terrible's happened within our life or our family, to be able to call that bad, I think is a part of like the healing process, actually. And so this passage isn't saying that God even makes everything happen or that everything that happens is good. We live in a flawed and a broken world, and so there are genuinely bad things that occur within our lives. And yet, what the promise here is that God works for our good in everything. So it doesn't mean that everything's good, but it means that in everything that happens, God is able to bring good out of it in our lives. So he's able to redeem the bad things in a way that brings good about in our lives. And I think that's a really encouraging idea. Okay, 1 John 4:4. I think this is the last one. You, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. A, you are better than everybody, especially your rivals. B, you were with God before you were born. And C, as a Christian, the Holy Spirit is in you, so you have no need to fear spiritual darkness. C, the answer is C. I thought this one was, I wanted to throw this one in just because we don't talk about the reality of spiritual darkness a whole lot, but it is a reality. And for me, and even like with our kids, one of the things we've talked to them about is like this particular verse can be especially, I think, encouraging when they're like, you know, sometimes our kids, they're like trying to go to bed, but one of them has to go downstairs, and they like don't want to go down there alone. They're like, you know, and but this verse can be helpful because it's actually talking about false teaching and false teachers. You know, you've overcome them, false teachers. But then it expands into this broader perspective of kind of what's happening spiritually behind all of these dynamics. And so the one who is in you, which is the Holy Spirit, the Bible tells us that when we place trust in Jesus, the Holy Spirit, the third person of the Trinity, actually like fills us in a sense and dwells inside of us. And there's a whole thematic connection that runs through the entire Bible that ties into the temple, that's tied into that idea. But the idea is that the Holy Spirit is with you always. So the very God that brought all things into being and continually is holding all things together, and is like, you know, more powerful than anything, that God is inside of you. And so when you wake up and it's like 2:59 and you're like, do I have to wait an hour before I can, like, you know, go get a drink of water? You don't have to, because the line is, greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. And I think sometimes just having the ability to remind ourselves of that in the moment, even say that out loud, can be an incredibly helpful thing, because the very fact that God is within us gives us, I think, the ability to not have to fear spiritual darkness, but also not deny it and act like it's not there. So, okay. With that, we probably generated plenty for the question box. And so if you got questions, we're going to do the 6-minute party, which is a chance basically just to like hang out and chat for a little bit. There's like decaf coffee out there as well as water. And if you've got a question about anything, you can feel free to write it down on the paper and drop it in the box, question box back there on the table. And then when we come back, I'll take like 5 or 6 minutes and answer as many as I can in that time. And then we'll jump back into our passage. So feel free to take 6 minutes to connect at your tables or even away from your tables. Okay, let's go ahead and bring it back together. I hope that you enjoyed the 6-minute party. And now we're going to come back with the question box, which is always a good fun time as well. I'm curious, cranberry sauce, canned? Can't. You're homemade. Oh, man, you guys are a house divided. Yeah. I like the canned. I'm all about the canned. Yeah, that's where I'm at. Yeah. All right. We'll go ahead and jump in with the question box. And so with that, we will take 5 minutes, and I'll answer as many questions as I can. And then we'll go ahead and jump into it. Trying to wake up my keyboard. That'll wake up probably in a second. Okay. All right, here we go. All right. So, at what point do children untie from us when it comes to determining their afterlife faith? For example, if a young child passes away, at what point does their belief/faith determine if they will end up with God? Okay. Yeah, this is a really good question. Untie from us. I'm not entirely sure. Some of this language is like not familiar to me, if I'm honest. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say that probably not everyone has the same position or understanding on this, but where I would, if I'm to speak to just where I'm at on it, there's never there's never a time where I think like, someone else's faith gets somebody else in. And so there's never like a point, no matter how young they are, where it's like, because I believe they get in as a result of that. But I also think that there's a certain point at which like, kids just don't have like an understanding enough, I think, to really grasp like what the gospel is. And so my take on it is like God is more just than like we would ever be, but also more loving and merciful than we would ever be. And so I think in a lot of ways when it comes to a situation like that, it's just a matter of trusting the character of God. And my thought is that those kids, it's probably a different age for every kid. I don't think it's like this birthday they're good to go. But yeah, my thought is before kids reach the age where they have the ability to either receive or like reject God, I think that like when kids pass away, tragically at an age younger than that, my take on it is like, man, they're in like the mercy and in the love of God, and so I think they're good, and so that's the way I'd answer it. As for like a specific age, I think people will point to different ages. I think it depends on the kid. Like some people genuinely trust Jesus at like the age of 5, and others it's like that's not even like able to comprehend things at that age. So, and I have a 5-year-old, so I know. Okay, so this is just reality of being in Utah, right? This is part of where this question comes from. It's saying, my LDS friend just got divorced very sadly after a year of marriage. He was a well-meaning but a heavily masking individual, and his off behaviors came as a shock to her and later forced her to leave the marriage. She's asked for counsel because she had a lot of spiritual confirmation through prayer and fasting that he was the one. Now she's wondering if or why God intended this. How do I respond? Yeah, that's a great question. First off, I just want to like affirm like the heart that, want to be in a relationship with and care for people and do a good job with all of that and care for them in the midst of the difficult things they're going through. What I would say is part of this is the spiritual confirmation through prayer and fasting. I'd want to dig further into that sometimes people will think that the way that I understand what God's will is in any decision, like do I turn right or left? Do I go to this school? Do I take this job? Do I get into this relationship? That I pray and there's a feeling that God is going to give me that confirms whether or not I should do this or not. And the Bible actually never tells us to like look for a feeling from God as a way to understand that. The Bible actually talks, I think the best way to understand it is we have freedom and wisdom, that within God's will, like, God is going to bring about his purposes in the end, but we have the freedom to make our own decisions. And I think God, rather than wanting us to look to him for every single decision, gives us the freedom to just live our lives wisely and pursue the things that we want. And so when it comes to whether or not I should get into this relationship or not, I think it's not so much about praying and waiting for a feeling. It's, how do you approach that with as much wisdom as you can? So how do you give yourself a good chance to get to know this person? How do you give the people in your life who know you the best a chance to get to know this person and to speak into it? How do you get a sense for, what their character is and whether or not they're going to be kind of a good partner throughout the context of your life and the ups and downs of life and adulthood and raising kids and all of that? So I would say, I don't know if I would lean into that specifically. Again, you've got to couch all of that within the sensitivity of a really difficult situation. So that would be the content I would want to get to when she's able to get there. But prior to that, probably just being present and caring for her and accepting her. There could be shame around a divorce, and sometimes that can be the case. And I would just want her to know that at least there's some people in her life where there's no shame whatsoever. There's just care, there's compassion, there's love and acceptance, and that you're with her through all of that. And maybe when the chance comes again, to then lean into the spiritual confirmation at a different point. Okay, we'll do one more, because my timer just went off. We'll do one more. This one's short. Are there different rewards in heaven? Okay, that's actually a challenging question. Yeah, I've never been there myself, so there's some passages that seem to indicate that it is the case, but also the question is I think on the one hand, what we can know is no one is going to be upset or unhappy with what their experience is in heaven. It is as good as it gets. I think if there's any type of reward that I can envision, it would just be a greater capacity to enjoy God, perhaps. That maybe you can enjoy God to the extent that your capacity's there. I don't have a verse or anything for that. That's just my best attempt to kind of understand it. Maybe there's a sense of honor and acknowledgement. It's in this life, so often honor and acknowledgement to other people, it can cause jealousy and insecurity in other people. And so in some ways, honor can actually create problems here in this life, but maybe there it doesn't. And we have the chance to celebrate everyone and celebrate kind of the different things that they did in this life and the different things that happen in the afterlife as well. And so in heaven. So yeah, that's how I would, I think, answer that question. Okay. I got to work out a strategy here because we only have 1 week left, and we've got all of these. Questions deserve answers. So, answer during ice cream? No more questions added. Okay, you can add any more you want this week, but next week we won't add more, but we'll get all of them next week. 20 minutes. 20 minutes of questions. Okay, that'll be great. So if you want your question answered next week. My thing's actually not coming back for me. Trent? Yeah. Yeah? Yeah, okay. Just keep going. We'll just keep going. Okay. Well, what we jump into at this point is working the skills. Okay. Oh no. Okay. I'm back in control. Okay. Yeah, we went way back. Yeah. Fruit of the Spirit. Okay. So we're going to jump into the passages now with the resources that we have. So when we started, we were asking questions about the first passage, but underneath that, what you have is this other one. We're in Working the Skills Part 1, and so on the second page, make use of the supplemental passages, which there's just one. What I'm giving you is everything that comes before the passage we looked at in this chapter, everything that came before it, and that does a lot, I think, to help us understand what Gideon is up to. The other thing I'll say is, thanks to Sam, Sam's got a beautiful study Bible. One of the best things about study Bibles is they come not just with notes from scholars answering different questions, but they also come with maps. And the Bible is written over a 1,500-year period. So the different what the geography looked like, what the cities looked like, what the nation looked like, it changes. And they've got maps for all of those different things. And this is a map specifically from the period of the Judges. And it's it's not the best picture, But right here is where it says Gideon. It's a wonderful picture if you look at it in Sam's Bible. But right here is Mount Tabor and Mount Gilboa. And in between them, so that you got one mountain, I think Mount Tabor is on the north and Mount Gilboa is on the south. And in between them is this valley. And that's the valley of Jezreel. And that's where the story takes place. And so if you had questions about that specific stuff, that kind of answers like the location. So you got the Dead Sea down here, Sea of Galilee, Jordan River. This is all of Israel. When you come to Jesus' time, this is the region of Galilee. He spends his time going back and forth between two different places, right? Galilee in the north and Judah in the south. This is Judah. Judah's where the kingdom, or Jerusalem is, the capital city. That's where the temple is. And so Jerusalem's like the capital of everything. When you come down to Jesus' time, you've got Judah in the south with Jerusalem. You've got Galilee in the north, and then Samaria in the middle. And 3 times a year, the Jewish people would celebrate these festivals that require traveling to Jerusalem. And so the reason he's going back and forth throughout the Gospels is he's spending most of his time up here, but he comes down to celebrate the festivals, because everyone is. And the city of Jerusalem's packed to the brim at those times. And it's actually during one of those festivals that he's crucified. But this is set up for the period of the Judges. So the different colors are all of the different tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel. And if you count them, you'll see more than 12 colors probably, because there's like a couple of half tribes. But yeah, so that is what we're looking at. But go ahead and jump into what you're doing and take some time to see how this passage helps you to answer the questions you had. And then we'll come back and discuss the meaning. And then after that, we'll jump into application. All right, let's go ahead and bring it together for just a minute. One of the unique things about tonight is we're talking about application, which you got to get to a place where you kind of understand it a little bit in order to do application. And that's what we're doing right now. But I want to bring it back together and just kind of summarize this a little bit. And hopefully this gave you a chance to answer a bunch of those questions. Like for me, if I look at it, Judges 6:33 to 40, one of the first questions I have is okay, now all the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern peoples joined forces and crossed over the Jordan and camped in the valley of Jezreel. Who are they, right? Who are these people? And if you look at this, the Jordan River is right here, and we know that the valley of Jezreel is here. And so they're coming from somewhere over here, and they're essentially coming in, and they cross over the Jordan, and they come into the valley of Jezreel. And when you go, that's verse 33 in our passage. When you go back to verse 1, you get this cycle that happens again and again and again throughout the book of Judges. It just repeats. And you can see almost all of it right here in verses 1 through 6, right? The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. That's the first thing, that again and again and again, they turn away from God. And as a result of that, they end up becoming oppressed, right? For 7 years, he gave them into the hands of the Midianites because the power of Midian was so oppressive. Essentially the Israelites, it says whenever they planted their crops, the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern peoples invaded the country. They ruined the crops, didn't spare a living thing for Israel, neither sheep nor cattle nor donkeys. They came up with their livestock and their tents like swarms of locusts. And so they invaded the land to ravage it. So who are these guys? They're the bad guys. They're the oppressors. And essentially every year when it's harvest time, they swoop. It's almost like A Bug's Life, that they're the grasshoppers. in Gideon, he's like the ant. He's the ant star, who actually that movie might be based on this now that I'm looking at it. So I don't but they're being oppressed and they cry out for help, and then God brings them help through a judge, which is basically like a sheriff in a Wild West movie. That's what the judges were. Don't think like robes in a courtroom. Think like John Wayne in a pistol. That's what this is. And but what's so interesting about Gideon is he's terrified. He's not brave. He's not courageous. He's so scared. And you can see that again and again and again throughout. The angel comes to him when he's threshing wheat in a wine press. He's in the wine press doing it because he's not supposed to, and if he gets caught, they'll hurt him or beat him up or kill him. So he's hiding while he does this. And the angel says to him, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." And he's probably what? Me? Because again, God's telling him, and the angel of the Lord, so often when it's the angel of the Lord, it's actually, this would be for the question box. Theologians will say it's the pre-incarnate Christ, which is to say that there's always, God has always been triune, right? Father, Son, and Spirit. And the Son took on our humanity. That's what we celebrate at Christmas. And that's when it took on the name of Jesus. But prior to that, the Son is eternal, the second person of the Trinity, and would show up from time to time throughout the Old Testament. Basically, if you see the angel of the Lord, or if you see God in physical form, it's like Jesus basically, the second person of the Trinity seems to have the role of basically representing God to humanity. And so you see that in the incarnation in its fullest extent, but you also see it here, that this is Jesus, before he's actually human, in addition to being God. So that's, again, another tangent. But, so all of this to say, Gideon has, overwhelming confirmation that God is with him in this, fight against the bad guys. But he, doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to engage in the fight. And so what does he do with the fleece? What does he do? Yeah, he asks for a sign. Yeah, and he's basically asking for confirmation. He's I don't need to hear it once. I don't need to see all the wet meat and bread burned up. I don't need you to I need to first make the fleece I can't ever remember the order. Make it wet when the ground's dry, and then make it dry when the ground is wet. He's stalling. He's procrastinating. And I think there's two things to take away from this, big idea-wise. And one is, even in our fears and failings, God can still work through us. That he doesn't choose someone else, or God still works through Gideon in like pretty incredible ways in this story, even though Gideon is like, I never like to apply the word coward to anyone, but he's like, he kind of is. That's what he is. And God still works through him, even in his own fears and failings, which I think is encouraging to us, that in our fears and failings, God can still work through us in incredibly powerful ways. The other one is, if we're talking about application, sometimes this will get into, sometimes people will look at this as like, okay, this is how I determine what God's will is for my life. Almost going back to that question box question about like, who do I marry? It's like, should I do what Gideon did to get confirmation within my own life? And what you see when you take it, when we actually break it down, we see he's not being held up as a model here. In kind of like an extravagant way, we're being shown his like weakness and his fear. That this is not a model to follow. This is, in a sense, it's like an embarrassing story of him, but it also shows us that God can work through it. So it's encouraging in that way. But I think if there's something to take away from this, it's if God has clearly said it, then we can trust him in it as we apply it to our lives, as we actually build our lives on the truth of the Bible that God has delivered to us in the Bible. We can trust that God is with us in that. And so, he had this direct encounter with the angel of the Lord. We have the 66 books of the Bible. And so I think in the same way, like if God said it here, we don't need like a wet fleece on dry ground or, dry fleece on wet ground to know that this is going to be good for our lives. We can just simply apply it and know that God said it and that he's with us in it. So does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, sweet. So tonight, because it's like application, what I want to give you a chance to do is actually just jump right into discussion around your tables around this. And the second piece of paper, Working the Skills Part 2, it talks about different ways to apply this. And if these, to the extent that these bullet points are helpful, like feel free to use these. But I'm just curious if you were to discuss even like your own lives. Like you've all got your own contexts, your own relationships, responsibilities, your own like things you're dealing with. How might you apply this to your life? That, in our fears and failings, God can still work through us. And if God clearly said it, we can trust him in it. So just take like 10 minutes around your tables and let's chat about that. Mm-hmm. Oh, no. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, I hope you guys had a chance to like have some good conversation around your tables about different ways to apply this. Just coming to the end of our time, just kind of want to wrap it up and land the plane. Usually we end with prayer. I always think it's good, just as a church, to have spaces within the church where we can learn how to pray. I think that's a really vital and important thing. And so it was at the center at your table. Basically, this is like a take-home packet, the ones that are stapled, and just some helpful slides from tonight that could be helpful to walk away with. But the front one is always something about prayer. And this one's just about how Bible memorization can also be, that's one of the ways to apply the Bible, is to memorize it. And it can be a really helpful way, I think, for prayer, actually, where the first step is simple. You, like, memorize the verse. And then the second step is, take 5 minutes or whatever. It can even just 1 minute and kind of prayerfully chew on it or prink about it. And prink is prayerful thinking. Prayerful thinking. If I included some other passages in here that speak to the way that the Bible actually like kind of nourishes us spiritually and like feeds our relationship with God. If you look at Psalm 1 at the bottom, it says, "Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked or stand in the way that sinners take or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord and who meditates on his law day and night." That meditate word, if you break it down, I want to say it's actually in some ways like it's tied to the word for like a cow chewing grass. How they're not quick. They're not like kids with chicken nuggets, right? They just like continue to chew it and to chew it and to chew it. And essentially, it's using that language for a reason. I think the invitation is to do the very same thing with the Bible, to kind of sit with it and consider it and, chew on it. And to do that in a way that's prayerful, I think is a wonderful thing. So I just want to invite you to pray with me as we close out the night. Jesus, we thank you for the time together this evening. Thank you for your word. Thank you that you are, in the midst of our fears and failings, you are unendingly patient and kind and understanding with us, and that in the midst of the fears that mark this life, that with all of that, you are still able to work through us in incredibly powerful ways. You can bring good out of the situations that we're in, even the things that are the cause of our fear in this life, that you are a God who's able to bring good out of all of that. And so we give you praise for that, and we thank you for the way you invite us to trust you even more in that way from Gideon's example. Psalm 119, 105 tells us that your word is a lamp for my feet, a light on my path. And we know that at times, we get into situations in this life where we're not exactly sure what the right way forward is, not exactly sure how we're supposed to handle something, or maybe we do know what the right way is, but we know that it's going to be difficult, we know that it's going to be painful, and it may be a way that we're a little bit afraid of. And yet we thank you that in the midst of that, you give us clarity about what your path is, that you guide us. But in addition to that, you are unendingly patient and kind and understanding with even our hesitation to take the step forward. And so we ask that you give us courage. We ask that you would give us grace. We ask that you'd help us to trust you more so that we could know not just, what the path is for us and have clarity about that, but that in our trust in you, we would have the courage to walk on that. So we thank you that your word is a lamp for our feet and a light on our path. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. All right. Okay, so hopefully you got a chance to walk away with a clear understanding of Judges 6 and some good tools for reading the Bible. Our last week is next week, and there will be ice cream. So would love to see you all there. Feel free to extend an invitation, too, if you got someone in your life who would enjoy this. But we'll wrap up Midweek Reset next Wednesday.